Hi everybody, my name is Aoudi. I started this video series with the main goal to demonstrate all the security tools in Kali Linux. This is milestone video number 10. By the way, it's a milestone not because I like the number 10, which I do, but because with this video I will complete the entire information gathering category. I will be covering SNMP tools plus a couple of other ungrouped tools. So let's start with a brief introduction to SNMP. The Simple Network Management Protocol was originally created to monitor and manage network devices like routers and switches, but then it evolved to manage any device in your network. SNMP has a simple client-server architecture. The server, we call it the manager, asks a client called an agent about its configuration, performance, and so on. Now, what's cool about SNMP is that the manager can ask any agent for this information regardless of what that agent has in terms of hardware and software. Data is collected in a hierarchical inverted tree kind of structure called MIBs. MIB stand for Management Information Base, and basically it's a collection of information organized hierarchically. This is as far as I will go in this brief introduction. Now, MIBs have logical groups of data points called object identifiers or OIDs. SNMP object identifiers simply correspond to different aspects of the system or the agent. So an agent would have multiple OIDs. Now the next question is, what's in it for us security people, ethical hackers, penetration tester? What can we get from SNMP? Well, first of all, you have to understand that SNMP has 3 versions. It evolved over time. The original version, number 1, used clear text and basically is considered vulnerable, meaning the communication between the manager and the agent is unencrypted. While version 2 got better in terms of performance, with version 3 encryption was introduced. Access rights in SNMP version 1 and 2 are managed by defining something called communities. A community is a type of a shared password between the manager station and the agent. Basically, it's how we authenticate the SNMP management station. So going back to penetration testing and information gathering, SNMP can be used to disclose a lot of useful information. And if the community is writable, it is also possible to make changes. So there is read only, read write, etc. So we will be able to do even more interesting things later in our penetration testing process. Many devices make use of SNMP, and it is often possible to guess or brute force the community names, like public or private, as you will see in the demo. So this is it for the introduction. Let us start with the demo. Okay, under SNMP Analysis, I have only 2 tools, OneSixtyOne and SNMP-Check. The first thing, as always, is to get to know your tools better using the help system and or the manual pages. So let's start with OneSixtyOne. Very easy to use, OneSixtyOne followed by some options that you see here in front of you. One interesting option is the community file. So by default, OneSixtyOne will scan 2 communities, the default ones, the public and the private. You can use the community files with a list of community names that you enumerated, or you can specify the community at the end of the command. So for example, the word public or private. Also, OneSixtyOne allows us to scan a network range, and that's what I'm gonna do today. I got my network range and I'm ready to use 161. Without any options, as you can see, it's using the two communities, public and private. Permission is denied to most available targets except for 1.129 here, but not very interesting information. So SNMP is enabled on this particular host or target, and as I will show you using a quick Nmap scan. As I mentioned before, port 161 is for SNMP. But if you were listening, you would realize that I also mentioned UDP. So by default, it looked for 161 TCP. I need to change that to SU. I could have specified it at the end of the command. I know, but that's me with my OCD. And there you go, 161 UDP open, filtered with SNMP as the service. Let's do something a little bit more interesting using the V option for the version, but also using the default script engine. As you can see, the Nmap scripting engine got me a lot more details about my target using SNMP. It enumerated a lot of information, including services, including running processes, but not really a lot of interesting information is found here on this particular target. Although I was able to enumerate all this information, let's go to a more interesting target using Hack the Box. Okay, so I am in my Hack the Box machine. Basically, it's a parrot distribution, and I have two terminal windows open because I want to do two things. I want to run our main tool, SNMP-Check, against a target called Mischief that I know has SNMP information to disclose. But I also want to show you that I can get similar information using Nmap scripting engine. So it's always good to know what your tools can or cannot do. As you can see, it's not just a scanner here, it's an enumerator, and we will use it in the same way that we used our first tool, 161. Basically, you have some options, including the community, public, private, etc. You can specify the version. Remember, I talked about SNMP version. The default here is public, and the default version is 1. So this should be okay for us. And then of course your target IP address. Okay, so SNMP-Check is done. I'll let the scripting engine in Nmap do its thing. Let's take a look at some of the information that this agent gave us. So we see here host name, description. These are all the object identifiers, the OIDs that I mentioned earlier. This section here basically tells me about the processes on my target, and we really need to not just scan through them, but to read what's going on, because as I mentioned before, this particular target has some interesting information to disclose. And it is the information that we're looking for is in one of the processes. Take a look at this process here. It's an HTTP server, port 3366, and I have here a combination of Loki and what seems to be a password. Because this is version 1, remember the default version is 1, the communication is in clear text, so I can see the username and password. And I will check them. I will try to access this HTTP server in my web browser using port 3366. Before I do that, I just want to show you the outcome or the output that I got from Nmap SC option. Again, Nmap was able to enumerate this information for me. So let's test it. Okay, so I have my Firefox open. Let's put the IP address of the target and the port 3366. It's asking me for a username and password, and this is what I managed to enumerate from my SNMP service. So Loki, and voila. Of course, I can do further more interesting things, but this is just a demo of enumeration or information gathering using SNMP tool. So it's still in the reconnaissance phase. I'm not gonna go further than this. Our next tool is Dmitry, or I don't know how it's pronounced, but I'm gonna call it Dmitry anyway. The DM here stands for Deep Magic. So it is Deep Magic Information Gathering Tool, and it's pretty straightforward to use. Dmitry followed by some option and then the target. So what the tool does is basically two things. The main thing seems to be a whois lookup. So if your target has a website, you can perform some reconnaissance information about that website using online directories. So it's a passive reconnaissance, and I covered that in the reconnaissance video, so I'm not gonna cover it again here. You can go and watch it. And basically there are additional tools that provides full reports about websites like Netcraft, for example, and Dmitry seems to do both of those. Now it's nice to have a tool like Dmitry because it provides the data in a command line and you can put your output in a file for analysis later. What I don't like about the tool is that it's not working for me. Please let me know what's going on, because it seems to use some old parameters, outdated parameters. I'm not sure, I didn't look into it. It's maybe a configuration file, or it needs to be recompiled with updated parameters. But anyway, I'm gonna show you how it's used, and it's very straightforward. There it is. Your target is either a website, so google.com for instance, and an option like W or N or S or E. You can read what these options are for. You can combine them. So for example, using a block or a group, I can do like so. So don't use W and then N alone. You can combine them as a block. Let me go ahead and run it, and while it's running I will explain a couple of other things. So you can see the P option and the F options are related to port scans, but again I'm not very convinced about this whole deep magic and whatever the author is saying with respect to everybody. I can do all of that and a lot more using a tool like Nmap, so I'm not very interested, to be honest. And notice here that the connection failed because it's actually using an outdated whois server. So again, maybe it needs to be recompiled with updated parameters. I'm gonna look into that. But if you do know and have that information, please let me know. So what's the alternative to this tool? I covered in the open source intelligence analysis tools like Maltego, Spiderfoot, and other, some tools that allow us to do pretty much this and a lot more, and of course they work. I'm not sure what's going on with this tool, but like I said, it's not doing anything new as far as we're concerned. So we do have alternatives. Let's move on to our next tool. Our next tool is IKE-Scan, and you should have some knowledge of IPsec, VPN, key exchange, and so on. But as always, I like to give a brief overview so that you're not totally confused. So IKE stands for the Internet Key Exchange. It's a protocol, and currently we are at version 2. IPsec refers to the Internet Protocol Security Suite. Without IPsec and VPN at the internet layer of the TCP/IP stack or at the network layer of the OSI reference model, we typically wouldn't have any kind of security. IKE and IPsec together form a VPN framework or protocol. I mentioned that we are currently at IKE version 2, which means there is version 1. Version 1 consists of two phases. In phase 1, basically the client and the server, or the two parties, would exchange 6 messages in order to establish a secure connection. Basically, they establish a phase 1 tunnel. It's an authenticated, secure tunnel. And they use the Diffie-Hellman key exchange algorithm. I'm not gonna go into that because this is just a demo of a tool. So basically they generate a shared secret key. And if you remember in the SSL demo, I talked a little bit about this, so you can refer to that video for more clarification. So the result of phase 1 is a single bidirectional secure tunnel. Phase 2 establishes the final tunnel, which is used for secure user data. IKE version 2 is more secure, more efficient, and for now, let's stop at that. IKE-Scan does two things. One is the discovery of hosts that have or support IKE, and then number two is to fingerprint those hosts to see what's happening on them. And we will do just that. However, I'm not gonna do it here in Kali because I want to show you more interesting results, so I'm gonna go to my Hack the Box machine. Okay, just before I start with the IKE-Scan demo, I just wanted to show you this website. I hope as a security student you're already familiar with it, chodan.io. Here we can really look for IKE hosts and use them in our testing. However, please, whatever you do, as always, as an ethical hacker, as a penetration tester, make sure you understand the legal implications. Make sure that you do things responsibly and you don't go outside the law. Okay, so here I am in my Hack the Box machine within my browser, which is very convenient. If you are on Hack the Box, the suitable target for IKE testing is called Conceal. You can search for it and you can do whatever it is that you see in this demo and a lot more. So let us start. That's the target IP address. So it looks like I have two errors. One is about the port being used and therefore I couldn't bind to that port. And the second one is about privilege or permission. So I'm gonna run it again with the sudo command in order to get rid of one of the errors. But I still have the second error. So this basically is telling me port 500, which IKE-Scan uses, is already in use. So simply use the sport option to change this default port. Let's say 555. Let's see what we got here. First of all, notice the IKE version is 1, which is less secure. What else? The authentication is pre-shared key, PSK. We notice that the encryption is 3DS, the hash function is SHA-1, and so on and so forth. So what I want to do next is to relate this to another tool we used earlier today, which is the SNMP enumerator. So I will use SNMP-Check against the same target to show you something interesting. Remember, we're still in Reconnaissance. I know a lot of students would always ask me, I want to do more with that, but you know, you need to learn how to crawl before you learn how to hack. As you can see, I got my IKE VPN password, which is the pre-shared key here, and it's hashed. So the next step is to see if we can crack this. And hint for you, yes you can if you use the right tool. So this is it for this tool. Let's move on to the next one. Our next tool is Legion. It is a GUI, so I'm sure a lot of students will like it, but it's also very powerful. It utilizes other tools like Nmap and Hydra and so on. And it has a configuration interface that allows you to pick and choose what you want from these tools, and it also allows you to change the configuration settings. So let's get to know it before we go into more details. There it is. Not much in the help section. Let's go to the config file, the configuration. As you can see here, these are the configuration settings for all the different tools that it uses, including Nmap, Hydra, and so on. You can make changes here if you want to do that. Because it's a GUI, I really don't want to go too much into details here. I'm gonna show you how it works and I'll let you figure it out. We have used more advanced tools and I'm sure that you can do it on your own. So here we can specify a target. It can be a single host IP address, it can be a network range, and it can also be a domain like bing.com, as you can see in the example in front of you. I'm gonna use a quick scan on one of my targets, and let's choose Mr. 130. You can specify easy or hard. If you choose hard, it will allow you to choose different port scans. You can see here TCP, stealth, SYN, TCP connect in Nmap. This uses Nmap actually. So TCP connect is a complete three-way handshake between Kali and the target. The stealth SYN basically does not complete the three-way handshake. SYN, SYNAC, okay, thank you very much, I know you're there. Also, you can specify whether you wanna do a host discovery. You can specify additional parameter. So in this case, we have the SV option, the O option, which is for the operating system. I think we can do what we have here in front of us, and let's run it. It got us a lot of information and it used different tools. You can see the first tool here, it crashed, so we can look at the parameters and try to find out what really happened. It used Nmap, it used FTP, MySQL, and it even took some screenshots of the target that we can see here somewhere. Okay, so it discovered the ports, the protocol, the status of the port, service, and version. Remember, we specified the SV option. So this is basically Legion using Nmap SV option with the O, capital O for operating system, trying to find out, as you can see here, what is the OS of my target. You can see what commands it used for each one of these tools. So if you take a look at the log, you can actually see. And again, remember in the configuration, you can change some of these settings. One more thing you can do here is to use other tools as well, not just a scanning tool. So for example, you can perform a brute force attack on some of the services and it will use Hydra for that. So let's try 192 and let's try to attack Telnet port 23. I can provide a file for the brute force. In password enumeration, we can use a file with default username and passwords for known services. So I'm gonna do something a little bit similar. Legion used Hydra to attack the Telnet service using the default username and password that I provided. So this is it for this tool. On with our last tool of the information gathering category. Last but not least is Recon-NG. It is a powerful web reconnaissance framework, and if you're familiar with the Metasploit framework, you will notice few similarities in the interface, in the workflow, and in the way that we work with the tool. It is different from most of the other tools that I've been demonstrating in the sense that I don't just put the tool name, some options, and some target. So let's get to know this framework better. Recon-NG relies on modules, but as soon as you start it, you will notice that there are no modules enabled or installed, and this is the first thing my students usually ask me. Where are the modules and how can I get them? Let's start with getting some help. We will be using these commands in order to perform our work. Let me start from the very bottom. The concept of the workspace, you can think of it as a project. So if you are performing reconnaissance on a certain target, I would create a workspace and I would call it whatever that target is. Notice here that I am in something called default. This is the default workspace, and it's there even if you didn't create it. If I do this, it will always tell you, if you use any of these commands, it will tell you how the command is used. So here I can create, list, load, and so on. Let's start with listing. And as you can see, I have the default workspace available and loaded. Let me use the create instead of the list, and let me call it demo. And now if I repeat the list, I will see that I have 2 and I'm currently in demo. I can load, but I need to do this. So now I'm back to default. Let me work in demo and let's go back to help. So I started from the very bottom right here. Next is the dashboard. It will display recent activities and the summary. So how many modules did you use? What are the contents of these modules and so on? You will see it shortly. It's a framework that has a database, meaning our work will be saved. If you exit the tool, you open it later, whatever it is that you collated, whatever information, whatever modules you installed, they will be available for you. Also, the tool allows you to query the database using standard SQL. Index is for development only, so I'm gonna skip it. Next is keys. Some modules require keys, other don't. So if I type keys, again, I will see that I can add a key, I can list a key, or I can remove a key. Let me list keys. There is nothing to list and we have nothing to add at this point. So I'm gonna move on to what I really think is the starting point of our work, which is the marketplace. So let me type marketplace. As always, it gives me the usage. So you can see info, install, refresh, remove, and search. Search seems like a good starting point. You can use regular expression for searches. So I will show you shortly, but let me just show you this table right here. This is the path of the module here on the left. The second column is the version, whether it's installed or not. And then we have D and K. D refers to dependencies, while K refers to keys. So where there's an asterisk, meaning I have a D or I have a K. I can also search using regular expressions. For example, I'm interested in netcraft stuff or who is. Let me just do this. And it found one module here that has what I looked for, netcraft. And basically it doesn't, notice here there is no asterisk, so it doesn't have any dependencies and it doesn't require any keys. Next, let me demonstrate actually using one of the modules. So let me repeat just a search, quick search, and let's look for something basic. So let's use this one. It's interesting because it looks for interesting files. So I'm gonna copy it. It's in my clipboard. And let me show you again, Marketplace has an install option, right? So I'm gonna use just that. And I will paste my module. I installed it, and just to show you, I'm gonna replace install with info, which is available for me as an option. It gave me information about this module, including a description. It checks hosts for interesting files in predictable locations like robots, for example, .txt, and so on. If it had dependencies and if it required keys, they would be right here. So you can use them in your parameter settings. And notice here the status is installed. If I go back to the original search in general and I go up to see the module here in the list, you will see that the status is installed. So what is next? Next is modules. So let me type modules. Again, the usage is simple. You can load a module, reload it, and you can search for modules. So if I do modules search, I will notice that there is a module available, okay? But I cannot yet use it. The concept here is to load it before you can use it. So let me load this module. And there it is. I am now working within the interesting files module. If I do back, just to show you the back command, I am out to my root. Okay, so let's reload it to go back and see what is it that I can do within this module. The first thing is to get some information about it. So I'm gonna use info. As I mentioned before, if you're familiar with Metasploit, you will notice some similarities here. So I have a description and then I have some options. It shows you the current value of each option, whether it's required or not, and a description. You notice here that one of the options is called source and the current value is a default. So I want to be able to change the default value into something I want. And there are some useful comments. It tells you how it's doing the search on what, it's using Google Docs, etc., etc. So let me now, my next step is to set the value of the source options. So I'm gonna say options show, and I think show doesn't even exist. So it's telling me you can list options, you can set them, you can unset them. Again, the source, which is required and it's currently default. So let's change it to my favorite web target, which is altoromutual.com. Let's repeat, instead of list, we will say set source, and the value is altoromutual.com. If I repeat the listing, you will see the value for source is altoromutual.com. If you make a mistake here, you can simply set it again with the correct value. Next, again, as in Metasploit, you can run it. So I do have a module available. The module is loaded. I gave it all the parameters that it needed, and now I'm ready to run it. It found 0 interesting files. You can test it on different targets, but of course, always test responsibly, understand what you're doing, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and so on. Let me show you the dashboard. It shows us a summary of our activities, right? So we have a module that we run, and it's run one time. If I run it multiple times, then the counter will be here. Also notice these are tables that if you manage to get information, the information will be saved in these tables. Remember, we have a database, and the database will be available for us every time we restart the tools. Our work is saved. So we have information about domains, companies, net blocks, which is basically IP ranges, locations, vulnerabilities, depending on what module you're using. So the next step from here really is to see in the marketplace what modules are available, how to use them. In case you need them, they are available for you. Let me do just one more demo, one more module to show you how I will populate some of the tables or one of the tables in this database. So let me go back again to my marketplace. It's an invalid command because I am in the loaded module. So I need to go back and then repeat. I'm gonna do a whois lookup, and let me get some companies or URLs. Let's use this one. It's done. Let's repeat with info. You don't have to do that, just to reinforce the demo. As you can see, no keys required, no dependencies, and it's installed. Basically, it harvests domain names belonging to a company by using this directory view-dns.info. It has also a parameter called source default, and this is what we need. It's required. So I'm gonna set it in the same way. Let's look for Google. Very creative. Okay, and we're ready to run. So now I'm using the name of the company, Google, within this module to look up all the domains that are found in view-dns.info. I'm done. Let me go back to my dashboard. And there it is. 500 domains populated into my domains table in my database. If I exit and I come back here and I always mistype dashboard. Why do you think there is no record or activity? I have my 500 domains in my domains table. You can query this table, you can delete if you're familiar with SQL. So this is it. With this milestone video, we concluded the entire information gathering or reconnaissance category under Kali Linux tools. If you enjoyed the video, if you found it helpful, you know what to do. Thank you for watching.